Good afternoon, and welcome to my live stream where every Friday at 3 p.m. we get to explore a lot of design techniques, both in terms of design and coding. And I take a lot of questions. Sometimes I do UI reviews. And today we're going to be looking at Xcode and SwiftUI. And we're going to be trying to prototype UI and animation. And I think it's a really exciting time to be learning SwiftUI because WWDC 21 is around the corner, so it's only in a couple of months. And I did one video about where you can learn how to create your own student project and submit that. You have about 3 weeks from now to submit your project and have a chance to win a scholarship, which is really cool because if you do win, especially when we don't have the pandemic, you do get to fly to the valley and to meet a lot of cool people and developers from Apple who can help you on your journey to learn iOS development and how to build for iOS, well, the Apple platforms. And typically these events cost more than 1,500 US. And so if you win the scholarship, it's going to be free and you get like a cool jacket and everything. So I made a video about that. Please check it out. Now, before we start, if you enjoy these videos, please give a like and a thumbs up. And I think this is a really good opportunity to kind of expose the whole community of YouTube at large about development, about design and code together. And it's really, really going to help us out. So if you do like these events and these videos, please let me know. So let's get started. First of all, this is the design that I've been presenting for a number of weeks. I've been working on the details. We went a lot into the design system and how to organize it, how to set up your dynamic type, your textiles, your assets, your colors, as well as the different components. We learn about auto layout, we learn about variants, interactive components, and now it's time to code. And also, when you design these things, it's important to understand that this is not some crazy dream that a designer have in their head, and it's impossible to work with developers. In fact, it's the opposite of impossible, because as a designer who codes, you understand the technicality and the constraints and the limitations. So I actually got a bunch, well, 2 comments to be precise, about this being a nightmare for developers to implement. And I just want to answer to that because I do believe that it's important to understand where I'm coming from. First of all, I'm a designer who codes. I've been doing that for about 20 years. And whenever I design, I don't design with the idea that it's going to be a flying car and it's going to be impossible to build, right? I design with the idea of the constraints and the time constraints and the technical constraints, and with the idea that I myself would understand how to do it in terms of the layout. Maybe not in terms of the back end, in-app purchases, and all of these new technologies that I've never touched, such as machine learning or AR. But from a layout perspective, everything here that you see is absolutely feasible. Now, some developers will be scared, of course, because it's not your basic layout, right? We started the design with a more basic layout like this one, which, it's great. And if you don't have the capacity, or if your developer might not have a lot of experience with animations and layouts, go for a more simplistic layout and go for more built-in controls, such as the tab bar, such as the large title, and don't go too far into sort of like the animations or the transitions and the gestures. That's fine. This is your decision to make. But what I can say is that I have done far more than just the basic layouts, and I understand the constraints. And what I want to teach is how to get over those constraints and overcome and still, make our developers happy, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who build our layouts, but not necessarily be too restrained creatively in terms of what can we do to delight our users? What can we do to stand out as designers? And I think it's important to understand that design is not just function. Design is also caring about the details, caring about the user experience, and caring about what our users care about. What that means is that they care about what is new. They care about the new iPhone. They care about the beautiful build quality of the iPhone. They care about the animations of the iPhone. They care about how do you think about the gestures. If you don't have the home button anymore, what do you do with your gestures? Now we have this swipe from the bottom. So someone had to come up with those things, and those things are not obvious at first, right? And it is important to understand that we're, as designers and developers together as a team, we're here to push the envelope. We're not here to sort of just do the basics. And we are very passionate to go to the next level. So I just wanted to get it out there. Of course, I'm not saying one answer is better than the other one. What I can say is that know your limitations, know how to talk to your developers, and also know how to prototype it yourself from a coding perspective, from a layout perspective, from CSS, and from SwiftUI. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. I think it's a very good question, and also a very good concern to have. And so yes. By the way, I have a question here about the iPad having a problem with login. So we have a test flight iOS app which supports iOS 13 and iOS 14, and we have fixed that issue. So one of the reasons why our current App Store app is not working is because it was made for the previous version of iOS development. We did that in Swift, and now we use SwiftUI 100%. And so we're in the process of building a new app, and the whole experience is going to be very holistic, meaning that it's going to be exactly the same as the website. It's going to have all the same features, and we won't have any bugs anymore, because when we build that current app, we had iOS developers, and it was like 2-3 years ago. We had a lot of legacy problems with the backend and stuff like that, and also some of our team went to work at other company. So when that happens, sometimes it's hard to support some legacy code at the time. So that's why we're rebuilding entirely the app in SwiftUI, and it's fully working. You can get to our beta, and you can download it from Test Flight. And so this is part of the description. You can download that new app. Now, going back to the layout here. So today, I want to focus a little bit on how, as designers, you can start from a design like this, and you can prototype it in SwiftUI without necessarily getting scared, or and also I think it's important for me to also inform developers as to how designers think, right? And how you would implement something like this. So I do have a couple of questions here. How do you feel about design that import core web vitals? Is it worth to have better design and lesser vitals? I'm not sure what you mean by vitals, but I think design at the end of the day is all about understanding your audience and what they're looking for, and understanding the technologies, the constraints, and also build to solve those issues. And I'm not sure if I answered the questions, but anyways, let me get back to this. And so this is our layout. And first of all, I just want to point out that these live streams are not always like super organized and super like scripted and all that stuff. So sometimes I haven't really worked days on these layout to present you, but let me show you what I have so far. And this is something I've been working today and yesterday. So for example, the layout that I'm trying to do here is this one, and it's gonna go to this screen right here. And you know, right now I'm currently building a new course, which is all about prototyping designs rather than building a more sort of, you know, legacy layout that you see on the other one. So, you know, I have a couple courses on SwiftUI. One is more like, how do you build like a more basic layout and kind of like a basic tab bar and all that stuff. But this course, I want to focus on what you can do more creatively. And so an animation like this, right? And, you know, what can you do with some of these more fancy animations and stuff like that? So how do you like animate back and forth like this, right? And it's not perfect. Like I said, I still have some tiny details to iron, but you know, this is going to be part of the course. I'm going to be explaining, you know, every step of the way. And you know, one of what I'm trying to do in these live streams is also to kind of walk you through my workflow and my sort of thinking into how I did that. And you know, this is not in any way, you know, let's start from scratch. Let me explain every single facet of it. Those are for my courses. These live streams is more to present to you what are the new techniques, what is the best way to get started, and what is an overview of what you can do with these new APIs and, you know, what's hot right now in the industry. So this is using Match Geometry. I have done another one called the App Store today, and it's essentially doing roughly the same thing. It's just that I changed things a little bit in terms of the layout. And see, you have these outline with the overlay, so a blend mode. And this is using a progress view. So yeah, I'm also using a match geometry effect, which is in SwiftUI 2, which is for iOS 14. And previously, I didn't, you know, use the selected item, which means that now we have multiple cards, and it goes specifically to the card that I'm clicking on. And you know, in the last one, the last live stream, if you remember, we only had a single card where we're using match geometry. We were not going to specific content such as SwiftUI and then UI design. So this is more dynamic, and it goes a little bit deeper into the implementation. And you know, we're also playing a lot with the background blur. You're playing a lot with the outline, which is in the design. So I'm not going to go over this one because it's pretty deep. Now, what I'm going to go over is the other one, which is this one. And this is going to be the screen that is the login screen. This one, right? So one thing that I want to show you today, which I find super exciting, is how do you use SVG shapes in SwiftUI. I think that's really exciting. And so this is something that we're doing in the design team right now. So our designers, believe it or not, are learning SwiftUI. And one of the reasons why I'm telling them to learn SwiftUI is because our developers are having a hard time creating these backgrounds. And of course, I fully understand that. Developers don't have a ton of training in design. And so if you ask them to create a layout like this, they will be able to do that. But if you ask them to create this X shape with SVG and background blur and blur effect and radial gradient and animate that, they will have a really, really hard time. So why? Okay, you're right. I forgot to make my avatar smaller. Let me do that. All right, sorry about that. I always forget about the avatar. I want to start like a big avatar so you see my face at the beginning so I can make an intro, but I always forget to make it smaller later. And so, you know, they look at the glow here and they're like, wow, I've never done a glow that use angular gradient, you know? They've never maybe done an animation that use match geometry effect. And so that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm also creating this new course, because I do believe that there are not enough resources. If you Google SwiftUI, you will find a ton of resources about you know, how to use a tab bar, how to use, you know, a button, a basic button, but you will have a really hard time to know how to create a shape from SVG, for example, how to use angular gradient, how to do gesture animations. And so that's why I'm here, and that's why I want to kind of like create this course. So now, our designers in the team, they're really impressive, and I think it is a mistake to underestimate your designers, okay? If you're part of the team and you think that your designers cannot code, you are making a mistake. They only need some hand-holding at first, and they also need a goal, which is what we're doing at Design Plus Code. We give them a goal and we tell them, hey, you made this background here. What if I tell you that you can do this all in code instead of exporting everything to PDF or to PNG and just call it a day? Now, if you do it in PDF and PNG, you will probably merge everything together as a single flat image. Now, that is great, but let me tell you two disadvantages of doing that. One, the file size. You save this whole image in a PNG, especially for the iPad resolution, it's probably going to be around, let's say, 1 megabit. And that's not good. If you have the choice to do this background in code, you will probably end up having about maybe 10 KB, which is like 1/100th of the size of the PNG file. The second thing is you cannot animate a static PNG, right? If I want to move this little circle, if I want to do a blobby effect, if I want to rotate that, if I want to do a little intro animation that lasts for 2 seconds, I can't because it's a static image, right? So we need to learn how to do this in code, and I can't ask a developer to do this because it takes hours and hours to recreate this in code, but I can ask a designer to do it as long as I tell them exactly how to do it. First of all, they need to learn SwiftUI, which is not that bad, right? This is the first week they've been doing it, and honestly, they're able to do it. I can't show you the result right now, but they are able to recreate a lot of these shapes, and using the technique I'm gonna teach you today. So, it's important, right? Like, designers are really good for graphics. They're really good for layouts, animations. They're passionate about those things. So work on their strength, right? Work with them. Now, let's start with this shape right here. I want to show you this amazing resource that I discovered thanks to them, actually. It's called Convert SVG to Swift. Isn't that amazing? I mean, how cool is that? So what you're going to do is that in Figma, you're going to copy the SVG. So copy as SVG, and then you go to the website, and then you paste the SVG, and then you click Convert, and it's going to create the Swift code for you. Mind blown, right? Imagine what your designers can do by just doing this. So now I can just copy this code, and I can bring that to my Swift project. So let me start from scratch right here, and I'm gonna paste that right here. So again, we have to tell our designers where to use the code, all right? And so this code is a simple struct and is of type shape, and now we're using a path, and we're drawing the path, and then we're returning it, and now we can use that here. So now it's called my custom shape, and so boom, parentheses, and voila, this is my custom SVG shape. Magic, right? So now let me set a frame, because it's essentially a shape. It's like a circle or around a rectangle. I'm gonna set it to 300 by height of 300, and now I have my little egg shape, right? Not super complicated. You can definitely tell your designers, hey, this is what you can do. Build a beautiful background for me. So yeah, that's it. I could stop with this live stream and we're all gonna be happy, but we're not gonna stop here. So now I'm gonna add a gradient. I'm gonna go to Figma, and so this is my gradient. Yeah, if you like what you're seeing, by the way, please comment and say this is awesome or this is mind-blowing, so I know that I'm doing something good. All right, so here I have my gradient, right? I'm gonna copy this. By the way, in Figma, if you don't know, you can actually select the property and it's gonna become blue. And when the property is blue, then you can do Command C to copy it, and then you can, let's say, create a rectangle. So, and then you paste that. So select the rectangle, Command V, and boom, it pastes that property. Typically, designers, they would sort of like copy properties, okay? And they will, so if you do copy properties, it's going to copy the entire thing, including the back, the border, and the backgrounds and the fill and the text and all that, the text properties. But if you can also select one by one and copy that from one to another. So in terms of getting the code, especially for gradients, and I'm going to need what we call a SwiftUI inspector. If you missed this in the last live stream, we actually have a community where you can find, okay? Thank you so much for the comments, by the way, guys. Really encouraging to see people enjoying the live stream. So you're gonna go to the community, and we're gonna go to plugins, and we're gonna search for SwiftUI. This really nice plugin called SwiftUI Inspector. By the way, I haven't tried Figma to code. This sounds interesting. Maybe I should try that and do another live stream about that. But for this live stream, we're gonna do SwiftUI Inspector, and now we're gonna go back to the design. And here, sometimes, by the way, when you select a shape like this, depending on how it's organized, it's not going to show the code. If you want to show that SwiftUI Inspector, you can do like Command /. And by the way, this is new in Figma. I've never seen that before. It's basically like the Spotlight in Mac, and they just launched it. It's a secret launch. They haven't. I don't believe they have announced it. But before we used to search from here. But now we have this beautiful Spotlight kind of quick search menu, and we have the same in VS Code, we have the same in Xcode. It seems like a new UI paradigm that is now everywhere in most of the modern application nowadays. So I'm going to search for SwiftUI. This is going to search for all the commands in Figma and the commands including the plugins that I have installed. And so I'm going to click on SwiftUI Inspector. And so now when I select this shape right here, I do have this fill property, but I don't have the code for some reason. So what I can suggest that you do is create a new rectangle, and from here you will copy and paste the fill property, and then you're going to be able to copy the SwiftUI code. If you want to include it with a rectangle, you can do so, and with the fill modifier, again, the fill modifier is for the shape, it's for coloring the shape, but since we already have our shape, that means that we only need the gradient right here. So I'm gonna click here, so it says code copied, and now I'm gonna go to Xcode and set a fill, and the fill, by the way, is for shapes. The foreground color is for pretty much the rest, such as the text. So fill, and then paste my angular gradient, and then if everything goes well, it's supposed to work. Yes, that's another thing that you need to understand. The fill has to be before the frame. Yes, the ordering matters in SwiftUI, because every single element has to make sense from a structural perspective. Imagine that every single modifier is a container, meaning that you want to set your fill, it has to be attached to your shape before getting into the frame, which is another type of modifier. Again, these are the kind of things that you get used to in the future. Now, I use my fill, and By the way, the angular gradient is not perfect, meaning that it doesn't do like a 360 degree. So a quick fix that I found was to simply use the same color twice from beginning to end. So I'm going to copy this. This is, by the way, using what we call a color literal, meaning that you can double click directly into the code to get this UI here, and you can change that. And you go to your color picker where you can paste your hex color. And if you want to have like a custom color. So again, I can also copy this and paste that right here. And so if I do that, you're gonna see that I have my 360 degrees angular gradient. Now I have my shape, and I also want to use this you know, if you look at the Figma file, right, there's kind of like this circle here that is hiding that conic effect in your egg, and you don't want to see that, so that you can create a beautiful effect like this one rather than seeing that conic effect. So what you're essentially doing is that you're creating a circle in the middle and you are blurring that circle, and that gives this beautiful effect. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to use an overlay on top of this. So an overlay is an element that sits on top of the current element, and that overlay is going to be a circle. Okay, and so I just need to place this properly. The second method is to use a Z-stack, but the thing is I love to use my own sort of, you know, I like to use modifiers because I avoid having too many containers. Z-stack, V-stack, H-stack. Sometimes you end up with a pyramid of doom, and that's not ideal. So I have this circle here, and I'm going to use the other gradient. So I'm going to select this one, copy the code, and again, this circle is a shape, so fill, and I'm going to paste that radial gradient, and I should have it here. Now I'm going to use a blur modifier, which is going to be, let's say, 30, and then boom. Look at that. Like, just with this, I'm adding a lot of depth to my egg. It's perfect for Easter, actually. Now that I think about it, it's Easter, and this is an egg. So, so there you go. We have this blur, and I can move it by using offset. And so the offset is using X position and Y position. And there you go. It's moving more to the center. I want to add this little cone, so maybe I'm going to move this by 50 instead. Okay, looks pretty good. So that's, you know, I'm not going to go deeper because we can definitely spend a lot of time into the details. So now is the time to organize our layout. So first of all, I'm going to put this inside a Z-stack. I am definitely noticing that my designers, when they're doing this, their code is like 1,000 line of codes, and it's like all over the place. And this is where, as developers, we can come in and tell them, hey, there's a better way to organize your code. And you can put your components, you can create components, you can code split so that you can be more organized. So yes, please do that, you know, like work as a team. All right, so I have my custom shape here, and all right, so I just want to make sure. Sometimes you can get lost in sort of like the pyramids of doom, where you don't know where is the end of your curly braces. One thing you can do is double click on this, and this is going to tell you that this is where it ends. The second thing you can do is, like, you can click here, and it's gonna jump a little bit. It's a little bit hard to miss. Sorry, it's a bit easy to miss. And the third thing you can do is command click on the curly braces, and then you fold it. So this can also help you organize your code as well if you have a ton of code. But the best thing to do is to organize in components and to create a new component instead. So for example, you can create a separate component in a separate file if you want to, or you can create it in the same file. So for example, I'm going to do struct, I'm going to call it egg view. of type type view, sorry. So every single view in SwiftUI is going to start like this: struct, the name of the component of type view, and it's going to have a body of type SomeView. Before I forgot the var, and then this is where I can put my component code. So this is all that matters, the component code, and this can be pasted anywhere in any component that you want. So this is my egg view, and then I can just reference that component like this. So now I have my organization, and I have my components, which means that I can change and reuse this egg multiple times like this, and I can just use offset to change the position as I see fit, right? So that's kind of like what I want to do, and you know, to be more efficient in my code, to have more structure. So now, using my Z stack, I'm able to create a background. So we can start with blue. Otherwise, I'm gonna get exactly the code. I'm gonna use the linear gradient here. And so, linear gradient. And I'm also going to show you how to create a mini component by code splitting. So you are going in, you know, this is a way where you're creating an entire new view. And so this new view, you can put it in another file if you want to. But if you don't want to do that, and if you just want to code split your entire content view, which means that they still will have access to the same variables, to the same animation states, then you can definitely use the code splitting scenario, and I'm going to show you exactly that. So instead of putting everything inside body, you're going to go at the end of body, and right after body, we're going to do var background. I'm going to name this background, which is this linear gradient. Again, especially when you have a lot of code like this, it's not pretty, especially when you're creating your structure. So I'm going to use var background, and it's going to be of type SomeView, just like the body. And I'm going to cut and paste that right here. And then I'm going to reference my mini component like this, without the parentheses. So it's just referencing the name, and it does exactly the same as before. And so I can definitely, because it's a background, you want to ignore the save area. You don't want to have this little, you know, empty space at the bottom and at the top. So I'm going to do dot ignore save area, and boom, we have our dark mode background. So, you know, just wanted to show you some basic stuff, and now we're going to get to the modal. So this is our modal. And in SwiftUI, everything is taking minimum space at first, and then you also want to start with the content before the container. And I know in CSS you start with the container, so you're gonna create your I don't know, your heading, and then you get into the text, and then you get into, you know, the inside of those elements. But in SwiftUI, you start with the text first. So, you know, text sign up, okay? And you're gonna see that, no, this is behind the egg view, so it has to be before, after the egg view. So this is the structure, just the same way in Figma you have your structure, one is below the other. So the first one is gonna be in the background, and then above the background, and then above the egg view. So now I have my text, and I can set this one to a font. So I've mentioned a lot of times before to use dynamic text, and the reason why we want to use dynamic text is because it's going to automatically adjust the size based on the accessibility options. So a lot of people, like your parents, my parents, they like to have really huge fonts, and so when you use dynamic type, it's going to adapt to the size of their fonts. And you know, I explained that a lot, so if you want to, it's definitely part of the description. So here I'm going to use large title, and it's 34, so it's large title. So I'm also going to use bold, and we're going to color this. So again, for text is foreground color, and we can set it to white. Now, typically, when you get more into production, you want to set your assets colors in the assets catalog. But for the sake of prototyping, we're just going to do this manually for now. So now that I have my element, it's time to create a container. So the container, I'm going to put that typically in a VStack first. So that's kind of like the most popular because your phone is vertical and typically you want to spread your content vertically using a scroll. And so VStack is definitely more popular than the HStack. The HStack is for horizontal, VStack is for vertical spreading of your items. So now I have my title and then we can get into the text. So I'm going to use my text element. And this time is going to be font using .subheadline. The foreground color, I'm going to use .white. Now I want to use opacity on this white instead of just using, white everywhere. So I'm going to need the type value. So the value type, and then I can apply multiple modifiers to that. Because in Swift, it's type inferred. What type inferred means is that it knows that it's a color. So it's kind of saying, okay, well, I know that it's a color, so you don't need to specify that it's a color. But the problem with that is that you cannot have multiple modifiers, multiple properties to your color if you don't specify the type. So now that I want to specify multiple things, now I'm going to need to set the color value, and now I can set more stuff like opacity and a bunch of other things. So I'm setting the opacity of my white to 0.8, and and there you go. So another thing that a lot of people struggle with in SwiftUI is that everything starts with minimum space, and so you can see that the sign up here and then the text here, it's kind of like not aligned, and that's on purpose. The reason why it's doing that is so that everything is centered properly using minimum space. And if it does that, then this layout can easily adapt to any platform beautifully, such as the Apple Watch and the Apple TV and the Mac, regardless of the screen size. So think about it. If you put it to the top left and you go on this giant screen, then your whole content is to the top left and it's not very user-friendly. But if your content is in the middle at start, then it fits every single screen, right, by default. And so I like to think of SwiftUI as reinventing CSS for 2021. And that's why they're trying to solve these issues that you would have on on CSS, right? On CSS, you have to kind of like start everything from the top left. So, all right, so I have my title and then I have my text, and I want to align things because I'm struggling with the centering. So one key thing that I like to use as a technique is to use the frame, and the frame using a max width. Max width meaning that, hey, I want to use, I want to be using like CSS now because, for multiple reasons. The text is still centering, but maybe I don't want to center. And so in this case, it makes sense. So now I'm going to use max width infinity, which means that I'm using them just like CSS. And I'm going to do alignment if I want to align this to the left. And then leading. In Swift, they like to use leading instead of left. So if you see leading or trailing, it means left or right. So it's a bit confusing at first for a lot of designers, but you're going to get used to it. So I'm going to do the same here, copy and paste the code. And there you go. So it's using the maximum width, and it's just doing that beautifully. Now I'm going to set a background color for my VStack. So let's start with blue first. And there you go. So now I'm going to go to my layout right here, and I'm going to copy my code. So I'm going to show you how to do color literal. A lot of designers are going to want to do that. So I'm going to do parentheses, type lit in my parentheses. It's going to initiate the auto completion call color literal, and double click that. It's going to create this little rectangle, and from this rectangle I can double click on it, and I have these preset colors. Or I can click on other, and it's going to go to my color inspector, and in which case I can go to the color wheel and the different color presets, or I can go to my second tab, which allows me to go to RGB sliders, in which case I can paste the hex color value from Figma. And there you go. So I can, of course, use the opacity from here, but the reason why I like to use the color opacity in the code is because it's more flexible to do that in the code. So I'm going to do opacity 0.8 here, just making sure that I'm respecting the design. So it's actually 50%. So 50%. And so when I do that in code, I can animate it, I can program it, I can make it dynamic, and instead of doing it manually from here. So that's why I love to use this opacity modifier on elements so that it makes it more flexible in the future. So now that I have this, I want to put my padding. So this is, again, this is going to confuse a lot of designers. They're going to add the padding. They're going to be like, why isn't it applying to my background? Again, this has to do with the think of every modifier as a container. So it needs to know the size before it can paint the background. So that's why you want to put the padding before the background, so that it knows the size before it paints the background. But if you do want to have that padding after, that's totally fine. And that's actually one of the techniques that I love to use, is that instead of saying a manual size of my modal, I love to use the padding and using the maximum size possible. So it's going to take, you know, a more dynamic size, and I'm using the padding multiple times to create my structure. So in CSS, normally if you want to do this, you have to set multiple divs and multiple containers, but in SwiftUI you have the flexibility to use modifiers, as many paddings as you want, as many backgrounds as you want, as many foregrounds as you want, and so that really helps. And now I wanted to add rounded corners because we designers, we love rounded corners. So let me ask you a question. Where would we put it? Do we put it after the padding or before the padding? Well, the answer is before the padding, because we apply it to the background and not to the padding after. So I'm going to set my corner radius, which is, let's say, to 30, and it's going to do that. So if I were to do that in my, after the padding, then it's going to look like this. And then a lot of designers are going to be like, why? Where is my corner radius? And again, very important to get used to the ordering of your modifiers. You have to understand the structure. And so that is important to know. Okay, before we move on, I want to show you how to do the background blur, because we are using background blur, and this is what we call sort of like glass morphism, and iOS and Mac OS, Big Sur use that everywhere. And so typically in Mac OS they're gonna add the outline, but in iOS they don't really have the outline. For me it's optional. I like to use the outline sometimes, to create a little bit more personality, but it's totally optional if you don't want to add that in your iOS design. But definitely in the in the website it makes more sense. So here I'm going to show you how to install a library. And for those who don't know what a library is, it's essentially a third-party library where you can use the power of the community. They build their own sort of extensions to Swift to make it better. Okay, and I'm gonna go to the link. Okay, and this beautiful library created by this person is essentially extending the capabilities of SwiftUI, because some features, I mean, it's still new, right? It's been only 2 years and something, and they haven't created everything, which is why WWDC is so exciting, is because every single year they always add new features to it. And so here, I'm using the Swift Package Manager, which, by the way, didn't exist like 2 years ago, and it's just now that we can use Swift Package Manager. Before that, we used to use CocoaPods and third-party libraries, which is not as friendly as the Swift Package Manager. And since Apple does it themselves, it's a lot easier and more integrated with Xcode. So to install that is very simple. You just need to go to the code and copy the URL, and then I'm gonna go to Xcode, and this is where I'm gonna go to Swift Packages, add package dependency, and paste that URL, and then install that library. So here it says I already installed it, but typically you wouldn't have installed it yet. So you're gonna click on next, 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 and finish. And then once you're done, you're gonna have this library installed. And when you have this library installed, then you will want to import this after SwiftUI. So SwiftUI X is the library. And once you import that, then you can use whatever the library offers. So it's really good to read the documentation, and these are some of the things that it's adding to your project. So for example, visual effect view, which is the background blur, SwiftUI does not allow that without using Swift, so it's not there yet. But that's why we're using this library. And if you want to use this library here for the background blur, then you're going to go to visual effects, and this is the code that you need. So everything is a view. You might have noticed that sometimes I'm using a color, sometimes I'm using a text, sometimes I'm using a shape, but they're all essentially a view. And that's why if I want to put the egg here, it's going to work. If I want to put a text as part of the background, it's going to work. And so it's the same for here. So I'm going to replace this color with visual effect blur view, and parentheses. It's going to give me the properties that I can use, which is blur style. And here are the different background blur option that I can use. So I know that in Figma, everything is kind of doing manually. So, you have to kind of like create a property called a background blur, and then you have to set sort of the blur strength. But in iOS, for the purpose of performance, because essentially you have to think about this as something that is pre-made by Apple with performance in mind. And when it comes to design, you want to make sure that whatever you design is not at the cost of performance. And that's why, instead of blurring everything manually 1,000 times over, you want to use something that is already made for this type of scenario. And in this case, it's the visual effect blur, and it has the preset blur strength and all that stuff. So you can't really customize the strength of the blur. So that's just FYI. But that's why also as designers, you should try to be consistent with iOS if you're designing for iOS. So it's about 60. And if you're not sure about these values, you can go to the UI kit from Apple. Again, links in the description. Then you can kind of like inspect the blur strength and the layers, the background blur and stuff like that, so that you can apply that with performance and with the built-in controls in mind. So now that I have this, I know that I have multiple types of blur sheets. Some of them have more strength than others, and it's kind of like the transparency of your color on top of the background. So let's go back to the code, and here I'm going to use .systems. The system is the new thing. So you have options for just material, thin, thick, ultra thin, and some other ones. So the thinner it is, the more you're going to see the background. So the less, sometimes depending on the contrast ratio of your background, the less you might be able to see to read the text. So typically you're going to use system material, but in this case, I know that my text is going to be quite readable, so I'm able to use system ultra thin or even thin. And let's see what it looks like. And let's resume this. All right. So it's going to be black, and that's because it's dark. Now, if you want to see it, you're going to have to play it. And voila. So if you want to play with this, for example, you can see how it looks like with thin. And you can see how it looks like with just system material. And you can also see how it looks like with light, right? And if you don't specify light and dark, it's going to use whatever is your system's preference. So most people have this automatically set up to during the daytime is going to be set to light, and during the nighttime is going to set to dark. But I know some designers who like to set dark everything, especially for Mac OS. I like to set dark everything. So you know, it's just good to know. So yeah, thin, ultra thin, it's up to you. And if you want to add the outline, I'm going to use either overlay or background. So overlay is a modifier that is going to go on top, and background is going to go underneath. So overlay, I'm going to use a rounded rectangle. It's going to be the same as this one. And so rounded rectangle has an extra property that is very nice, which is called the style, which allows you to have this beautiful apple corner radius. Okay. And right now it's black. So if I want to set the outline, I'm going to set to stroke. And instead of using a background color, it's going to use the stroke. So what you're noticing is that the corner radius is slightly different from corner radius normal to the style continuous, and that is on purpose. So if you want them to have the same, then instead of using corner radius, you're going to be using a mask. So I'm just going to copy this, or maybe not. So dot mask, and using, so masking is like saying I want to clip this. You know, it's like a mask in Figma. You want to use a shape that is going to mask your content. So I'm using the mask modifier, and corner radius the same, and continuous. So now it's going to be perfectly aligned to the outline. And the outline right now is using a stroke. The stroke is by default the color black. So I can change that to color.white. And I can also set that to opacity 0.2, let's say. So another thing that I want to show you here, which is really important to know, is that everything is a view in SwiftUI. If everything is a view, then you can use a modifier for everything. So the stroke modifier, or sorry, maybe not the stroke, but the padding, the background, the overlay can be applied to anything. And the same with the blending mode. So I can apply the blending mode to my outline only. So blend mode, and I can use overlay. And instead of using a normal white, now it's using the overlay. Now it's not, it doesn't show it because I have opacity of 0.2. But if I set it to fully white, then you can see this beautiful outline with the blend mode of overlay. Isn't that awesome? I mean, you know, I can use color dodge. I can use, you know, obviously color dodge. If you use white, it's going to be white. But if I can use color burn, I mean, again, white is not going to show anything. But if you're familiar with the blend modes, you can definitely play with these things such as lighten, hard light, soft light, and so on. So soft light is the brother or the sister of overlay with a lesser strength. And so I like overlay. You know, it's kind of nice. So again, this blend mode can work both on the rounded rectangle, or I can just apply to everything, right? And now it's going to apply to the entire container. But that's not what I want. I just wanted this to only apply to my outline. So that's the beauty of it. Okay, I seem to be talking more than I should, which is why we're not very advanced here. But I hope you appreciate. So if you appreciate all the little design tips and the in-between explanations, tell me in the comments, please, so that I know I'm not doing something wrong. So, all right, let's go to the next thing. We're gonna take a look at the, at the text field. So one thing you can do in SwiftUI is that you can do Command Shift and L, or you can also click on the plus sign. And this is beautiful for beginners out there, for designers out there. You know, this is where you should be starting on, right? Like, you should start here, and you should scroll the entire way and see like, what can I do with SwiftUI? You know, what are all the things that I can use in SwiftUI so that I don't have to reinvent it in Figma, right? And so, you know, you can see here we have label links, we have date picker, we have color picker. Like Apple provides so much stuff that you don't need to reinvent. Okay, I know in CSS you kind of have to search for it, especially if you want to do like a date picker or a color picker. You know, it takes years and years for HTML to come with a native control for that. But in SwiftUI, you have a lot of those things already. And the great news about that is that you know, it adapts automatically to all of these other platforms, such as Apple Watch. You know, the color picker or the date picker is going to look different on Apple Watch, and the text field. And that's why, you know, sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know, you don't need to reinvent the color picker or to design your own color picker. Sometimes you can just use the ones, you know, provided by Apple, and you're going to save so much time, so much adaptability to the different platforms. So now I'm just going to search for a text field. Okay. And the text field, I have my placeholder, and I'm going to need my state. So if you don't know what a state is, this is what allows you to have some dynamic states, either for your animations or for your data. Sometimes you can use that for, like, you know, in this case it's a text field, so people are going to be able to enter information on the text field. And all right, so let's do that. I'm going to set a state var email is equal to false. Oh no, not false, sorry. Is equal to nothing by default. And here I have my placeholder text, so it's going to be email, and I have my text value, and it's going to use a binding to the value, which is email. And I'm going to resume this. And so I have my text field. You can barely see it, but you know, I can type, so I just need to style it. A lot of people have been asking me in the past how do you style your text field? Yeah, this is where I would say SwiftUI is a little bit limited. It has some style, okay, you know, text field style, and SwiftUI has such a great documentation, especially in SwiftUI 2. They have amazing documentation. For those who don't know, you can command option click here, and it's going to give you so much more information about this. And you can click on here, it's going to go to the full documentation as seen here. And so what I want to know here is what kind of text field style that I want, that I can use. In this case, I have default, which is a default one. We have the plain, the rounded border. So let's try the rounded border text field style. I'm gonna copy that, and I'm gonna paste that in the parentheses and add my own parentheses, and now my text field looks like this. So those are the preset text field style, okay? But the thing is, if I go back to my design, it's a pretty custom one. So today I'm gonna show you how to do a custom one. Okay, so I'm gonna remove this. And instead of using that, I'm going to use foreground color to color the text. I'm not sure how to color the placeholder text. I'm going to have to get back on that one. But first, I'm going to color the, you know, the normal text when people start typing. Instead of black, it's going to be white. And also, I'm going to add a background. And essentially the same way here. So I'm going to use the same color. Okay, same technique. So color parentheses lit, and I have my color literal. I'm gonna get my value from the hex. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for the likes. I see that we already have 114, which is insane. So that means that this video is gonna do quite well, and hopefully we can do more in the future. So all right, so now I have my background. I'm gonna add some padding. And we can set this to 12. Okay. Again, same technique, padding before the background color. Okay. And I'm going to use, again, the rounded corners. I don't want to retype this, especially my performance right now doing live stream is not amazing. And so I'm just going to copy and paste a lot of things. And we can set this to 16. So All right, it's starting to look pretty good, and I can definitely add some opacity. Just like in the design, it's going to be 80%, 0.8, and I have some opacity, and I can also set the copy. So that's another thing I love about modifiers is that they're pretty isolated, and I can just copy and paste them around. So for example, the overlay with the outline, I can just copy and paste here and use the same values, so the blend mode and everything, and now I have my beautiful outline the same way for my text field. And let me add another one. So I'm going to copy this and add another text field. This time I'm going to set the password, so it's going to be a secure field. Okay. And now instead of showing the text, it shows the passwords. I just need to have a different placeholder. So password. And I also need a different state. So I'm going to change this to password. And I'm going to use that as part of my binding here. And there you go. So now, you notice that when I use the same as email, when I type on one, it goes to the other as well. But now that I use different states, I can type different here and different here. So that's the difference. Now we're going to take care of the button, but before getting in the button, we're going to just copy some text, and so we're going to use this text right here. Okay. And maybe we're going to add some padding. So it's going to be 20 instead of 16. So if you don't set the padding manually, it's going to be 16 by default. And the same with the spacing between items. So just like the CSS grid, you are going to have a default settings. And in this case, I believe it's 8 by default. So if you want to change the spacing between items, you're going to go to the VStack and you're going to change the spacing to, let's say, 16 between items. I can also change it to 20. Okay, and there it goes. It's so much better like this, right? Like, this is where developers, they're like, why is your design so pretty and mine sucks? Well, yeah, just need to add some padding, That's it. That's the secret to designers. Just add some padding, okay? So that's it, add some padding and your design is going to be so much better. All right, and now we're going to deal with the button. So button, I'm going to bring button. Okay, by default it's going to be a text button, and all right, so I'm getting a lot of comments. That's fun. I'm going to answer questions at the end, especially until my my stream is going to get super slow, so I can't barely type stuff. And so button action is not going to do anything for now, and I'm going to add a let's say sign up. By the way, the reason why my stream gets slower is because I record in 4K resolution, which nobody does that, and it takes a toll on my computer. And I also realized that before this stream, I was recording on my 6K resolution, and so that was making my system even slower. So hopefully, a lot of people, they're like, why is it my computer gets slower? Well, that's because our expectations of technologies is way different now. Now people expect 4K resolution, they expect 8K resolution, they expect crazy number of pixels, and that's why we end up with these things. So all right, same thing here, and for the sake of saving time, I'm just going to reuse pretty much roughly the same values, and there you go. It's magical, right? Modifiers. No, sorry, this is not correct. So I'm going to put it in a button instead. Actually, this is correct. You can either put it on the button or on the text. It's the same. Everything is a view. So right now it's taking the minimum size. So what I can do is to set the frame, and the frame is going to do max width dot infinity, and align to the center. That's fine. So boom, that's it. Okay, and I believe I haven't tested yet, or maybe I have, but I forgot that it can do a gradient on your text. So let's try that. I'm going to use foreground, and since everything is a view, including the color for the foreground, then I can just use a gradient. So let's do that. Let me just duplicate this. Okay, and I'm going to use one of the gradient here. If you're curious about the design part, I have a lot of streams about UI design, so definitely check them out. But today I'm kind of skipping a lot of the design aspect, and it should work, if maybe, or maybe not. Okay, maybe it's not working. I'll get back to that one. I definitely managed to make it work before. I just forgot, how I did it. Okay, so let me just get back to, okay, it's getting really slow. All right, so background color and color dot white, and so let me just make sure. No, I don't need this modifier at all. And okay, the last thing I want to show you is kind of like the glow button here. I know a lot of developers are like why is this so fancy? Like, this is a nightmare to implement. Well, that's why I'm here, right? I'm a designer who codes, and I love to try new things. So let me show you how it's actually not a nightmare. All right, so let's try with a background. And the background is a view that can be essentially anything you want. So you can see right now is white, is blue. And so I'm going to use a gradient. Let's see. I'm going to use this one, angular gradient. And I'm going to make that as part of the angular gradient. Okay. And then I'm going to use a blur modifier and to 30. So one of the issues, and this might be a bug with SwiftUI, is that for some reason the angular gradient is masked. And by the way, I tried a lot of things. It's not about, it's not about the code itself, because if I was to use radial gradient, okay, let me just use radial gradient instead. Okay, I just want to make sure that this is where I can get a little bit lost with the code because of the gradients. It works. See? Look at this beautiful glow here. But this is using a radial gradient, and the other one is using an angular gradient. So there's definitely something weird going on with SwiftUI, and it's not about the code. It's definitely, I think, SwiftUI. And maybe I'm wrong, but maybe someone in the team of SwiftUI can tell me why angular gradient doesn't work and the other one works. But I did find a solution, and the solution. Let me just use the angular gradient again. Is to set the frame size. I know it's funny, but that's just the way it. But look at this beautiful glow. It's amazing, and this glow is not a single color. It's actually a multiple color glow. And that's fun. That's fun. So let me just go to radial gradient and put it back. All right. So now it's not gonna have that glow anymore. So I managed to fix it by setting a frame size for some reason, and it's gonna be, let's say, width, height 80. I believe it works. Okay, there you go. So again, this is so weird. This is so weird. Someone at Apple can tell me why is it that angular gradient is not working? Okay, please. I don't want to set a manual size for my button, because the logic in SwiftUI is that when you have a shape, it takes the full width and full height by default. When it's a text, it takes the minimum size. And so that's why I don't need to set max width or max height, and I can just remove the frame. And so, there you go. And also, I also noticed that there's a magic number. So for example, 70 works, but 64 does not work. Look at that. It does not work. What's going on here? All right, so 68 works. 67 doesn't work. Isn't that funny? So yeah, SwiftUI still has the little quirks like that, and it's not like SwiftUI is the only thing that has quirk. I mean, the React and Angular, every platform have their own quirks, and I don't think this should be discouraging you from using SwiftUI, but you have to remember that SwiftUI has been around for about 2 years and a half perhaps, and so and they've been in development for way longer, as I know Apple. So yeah, this is what's going on, and all right, so this is how you do the gradient, and yeah, from here we can just my son is visiting me right now, so that's why he's distracting me at the moment. Okay, and maybe I should take the questions right now so I don't like lose my train of thoughts. Okay, and all right. So maybe I can show you how to do some basic animations, but maybe using a state. We don't have a lot of time. We already covered like an hour or something. Maybe in the next live stream I can cover more the animations aspect. But I will be sharing the source files, and with every live stream I share the source files in for both Figma. So for example, last week I actually shared the entire design file here, which we all put hundreds of hours into these artworks, into this design system and stuff like that, and I shared that with my subscribers. So if you're a pro subscriber on DesignCode, you can download the source file for this whole design, and you can just inspect everything, how it's built, how it's designed. And with every live stream I also share the source file for the UI, and and also the other project that I showed you earlier. So I will be sharing the source file. You can take a look at how I did that. And again, I'm gonna cover more into the animations later, but as a basic, you can definitely set the state. So my son is just sitting next to me, and I'm like, all right. So yeah, it's kind of slow. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to cover the animations at the moment. Okay, so yeah, it's super slow. So in the meantime, please ask me questions so that I can definitely answer your questions before we end the live stream. So we have the state for the animation by default is set to false, and you can definitely do some basic animations. For example, at the beginning on appear. And let's say you want to do an intro animation, you want to change the timeline. So for example, on appear, it's going to set show to true. But to do that, you're going to want to use with animation. Okay, this is really slow. This is why I need to do like a lot of things and a lot of the animations in the first 30 minutes. Otherwise, the computer gets a lot slower, and my hard drive is kind of like writing these 4K video in the meantime, and so it gets slower and slower. And we can set the appear to true. So this allows for the transition for the animation, and I'm setting to a spring animation. Okay. I don't know if I made a mistake somewhere. Okay, appear. No, sorry, I set it to show, so it should be appear. So this is an event. Basically, what it means is that when your layout is showing, and it's going to start this event. And when the layout shows, whatever, in this case, it's the egg view, then it's going to change my state so that I can set the animation from the beginning state to the end state of my animation. So what do I want to animate? Maybe I want to animate the offset. So I can set offset, and using the X position for the animation, I can set appear question mark. So now I have my end animation. So is this appearing? Then I can set it to 100, otherwise set it to 0 at the beginning. And that's kind of like how you do the, and then we can set the sort of like, okay, let's hope that it works. If you see this little loading indicator, that means that that is still loading and it's not working. And it might have some issues. Okay. So on appear, and sometimes you can just add a space. Yeah, maybe there's some animation, it's too fast for you to see, and also my system is super slow. What I can do is use another type of animation, linear, with a duration. If you want to learn about animations, by the way, I have a lot of courses and tutorials about animation. And so, you know, you can also set the delay for your animation. So you can see it's working. The egg is moving, and I can make it faster or slower. I can, if I want to add more modifiers to my animations, such as options, delay, and stuff like that, I need to set the type value, just like the color. I need to set the type. Oh my God, this is not good. All right. So animation, okay. And then you can set the delay. So for example, if you want to wait a little bit at the beginning, maybe I want to wait 1 second first. And then 1 second first, or 2 seconds first. So what it means is it's going to wait 2 seconds before it starts animating. And so again, as designers, see, it's waiting 2 seconds and it starts animating the egg. And again, this is such a good information for you. Is if you're a designer, you don't know what to do, you want to prototype your shapes, your backgrounds, your buttons, this is how you do it. Like, it's not complicated. I showed you at the beginning of the stream. You can just use SVG to Swift. You put your shapes, your backgrounds, your gradients, and whatnot using SwiftUI inspector. You bring your layout, you create your layout, and now you're creating an animation state where at the beginning of when your layout is showing, then it starts animating whatever you want. And again, use this little plus here and use the modifiers. So the first tab here is going to tell you that these are the things that you can create, the controls, the date picker, the button. But the modifiers, and this is so much more exciting, is like the CSS properties and the different things you can do, like the effects. For example, you can set to a scale. You can use a scale effect as a modifier. And if you want to animate the scale, we can start with 2 and then 1. And now you're going to see, let me set the delay. See? Look at my egg. It's like going so big right now. And again, I'm using vector shapes. I'm using code shapes, which means that I will never have a problem with the resolution of my egg. And that's so beautiful. And learn how to to do these things. It's gonna make your layout so much more flexible and adaptive. And imagine if I have this for my iPad, I don't need to go back to Figma and recreate these backgrounds in PNG for every single resolution at 1x, 2x, and 3x. I can just do everything in code and organize my gradient the way that I want. I can organize my shapes the way that I want, and I can animate them. And so it's, you know, it's gonna make you into a super designer. A lot of people like to jokes about 10x designer. Well, maybe this is it, right? Like, without killing yourself, of course, and you know, learn what you can. And if you know, if coding is not your thing, that's fine. But at least understand that these are the constraints that you can do, and these are the things that you can do, and these are the things that your developers can do for you, and understand that where your limitations are, and so that when you design your application in Figma, then you know for a fact that there won't be a problem with your layout, and the developers are not going to complain and say, hey, your design is a nightmare to implement. So, you know, hope you found this useful. And you know, if you want to learn more, I have so much content. Just recently, we actually recorded like all 80 videos of, you know, 80, not like just one or two or 20. We have 80 videos on SwiftUI, and you know, we also have for React hooks that we just started. We have iOS design, and so here, look, all the videos have been recorded, and the source file for every single of them. So, for example, recently I did one for, which one was it? I did one for, I believe, horizontal scroll with 3D effect, right? And you know, I'm showing you how to do like that scroll animation with 3D effect. And every single of these tutorial and videos, we have the source file that is going to help you. And the same with the placeholder one. If I remember, I'm just gonna placeholder, yeah, it's here. So we provide the source file for these and show you that you can animate it and you can create a loading with that. So we have a lot of content. We also have a lot of courses around both design and code, and SwiftUI, we have like 3 courses around that. So we have a ton of resources. If you want to learn more, you know, please subscribe and get access to all the source files now. So now, and I'm gonna take the questions. And in the meantime, if you enjoy these live streams, I do these every single week, and give us a thumbs up so that the, you know, the robots on Google, they decide if people should be seeing these videos or not. It's going to help us, you know, get there. So let me look at some questions. All right. I'm gonna scroll a little bit. A lot of great questions, a lot of great comments. Thank you so much for participating. And okay, I tried to download. Yeah, again, about the iOS app that's currently the App Store, you need to get into the test flight beta, and you need to download the new version again with a new design. And currently we have this design right here, and most of these screens have already been implemented. Everything is fully working, dynamic, with real data, with real progress between devices, from web to iOS to iPad. Excuse me. And you know, that's you know, please use the new version of the app if you don't want to have any issue. So, all right, I'm not a designer, but how can a team keep them style libraries synchronized across the team? So you should definitely watch my other live streams about UI design, where I show you how to implement auto layout and how to publish your variants. So for example, you're gonna have your design system here, you're gonna have your gradients, your color style, your text styles, you're gonna have your components, and they're gonna be neatly organized. You're gonna need to have a pro account on Figma, and in your assets, you're gonna organize them based on the frame. So when you organize these cards based on the frame of the cards, then it's going to list the cards, and it's gonna show them right here in the Assets tab. And once you have this design system, then you can publish that to your team. And so you're gonna click on a publish, and once it's published, you're gonna see this as part of your team libraries. And anytime that you create a new file, you're gonna be able to go to assets and enable whatever library that you wanna use in your design file. So that's how you share your design system to your team. Yeah, I want to know how to do a separate PC for live streaming. And right now I have like a PC and a Mac, and I also have other PCs, but I don't know how to do it. So if you can point me to some resource or video to show me how that I can use another PC to stream and this one to execute, that would be awesome. Is Figma free? Yes, Figma is free up to a certain point. So you cannot have all the team features such as the team libraries. I think you have a limit of 3 projects, but that's fine. Like a project, you can have, I think, as many files as you want in the project for the free version of Figma, but you have all the features. The only thing that's missing is the team library. And I think that's basically it. You should definitely read more on Figma. Is it hard to win the Swift Student Challenge? That's a great question. It depends on your ability. I think if you've never done Swift, you've never done SwiftUI, it's going to take a couple of weeks to study and execute, and depending on how fast you learn and also how much you can learn by yourself, right? Like at the end of the day, it really depends on the kind of person you are. Are you the type of person who can Google everything and learn everything from YouTube and Google? Or are you the type of person who always needs someone else to tell you what to do at every single step of the way, in which case we have courses for that. But if you're the type of person who can, like learn by yourself, my last video, which is around, using Swift Playgrounds, is going to help you a lot. And, you have a lot of sample projects, you have a lot of sample files from the Swift Playgrounds file, and you're going to be able to use that as a guiding point to create that. And in terms of like, is it hard to win? Well, I think, since we have a lot of competition, they're definitely going to expect something at the very least as like the rock, paper, scissors little template that they have in the Swift Playgrounds app. And so with that, I think you should have enough. Definitely you're going to need some time to study. Like I don't expect this to take like a couple of days unless you have a lot of experience with coding or a lot of experience with design. So I think that's basically it. I'm building an app at the moment. I'm using Figma to design it all. Then I planned on building it with SwiftUI. Would you say it's a good idea for a social media platform? So this is a great question. Now, a lot of people, they think that, when they first start an app, they need to support every single platform. And I tend to disagree with that because I do believe that it's very important to start with a niche first. And typically, if you think about all of these popular apps such as Instagram, Snapchat, and Clubhouse, they always start with iOS first. And then once they reach a level of, popularity and traction, then they move on to Android and they move on to web. So focus on your area of expertise. If you're more comfortable with the web, start with the web. If you need to expand from the web, go to iOS. And if you need to expand again, you go to Android. If you believe that Android is your main area of focus, then go with Android first. Learn Flutter, learn their platform. So I think SwiftUI is great if you want to start with iOS first. And typically from a business perspective, iOS is known to be the better sort of like more high paying and high yield platform when it comes to profits. As you know, Apple is really good with profits. They're not necessarily about the mass market, but they're very, very good with having the highest quality of paying users and customers and audience. And Android is known for the masses. Again, you have to pick your poison. It's not saying that one is better than the other, but definitely the strength of iOS is about quality. Thank you so much for all the kind comments. And how do you use SF symbols in Figma? Well, I can do a quick thing. It's just you're going to open SF symbols and you're going to copy whatever icon that you have. And then you just need to paste directly into the font like this. Now, you just need to make sure that your font is set to SF Pro, and you need to download the San Francisco fonts from Apple. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So that's just important to realize. All right. I just want to thank you for coming to this live stream. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.